The ship descended slowly through the thick clouds of Vortalis 7, its metal body glowing from the heat of entry. Commander Ji-ho sat in the cockpit and watched the planet grow larger beneath them. He had been to many worlds before, but something about this one felt different. The clouds were purple and silver, swirling like water in a strange dance. Behind him sat Dr. Hei-Wan, the expedition's chief biologist. She pressed her face against the window, her eyes wide with wonder and curiosity. She had spent 5 years studying alien life forms from books and video files, but this was her first real mission to a living world. Her hands were shaking a little, but not from fear. It was excitement. "Look at those trees," she said, pointing down at the forest below. The trees were tall and thin, with leaves that seemed to glow with their own light. They were not green like Earth trees. Instead, they shone in shades of blue and soft gold, like they were made of crystal instead of wood. Commander Ji-ho smiled at her enthusiasm. "Remember, Hei-Wan, we need to be careful down there. This is a new world. We do not know all its dangers yet. The reports say there is intelligent life here, creatures called Vorans. We have only seen them from the satellite images, but we must treat them with respect." Hei-Wan nodded, but her eyes never left the window. She could already see movement down there among the crystal-like trees, shadows that were much larger than any animal she knew. Could those be the Vorans? The ship landed in a clearing near a cliff face. The ground was soft and warm, even through Hei-Wan's thick boots. The air tasted strange when she breathed it through her mask, like metal mixed with flowers. Everything on this planet was different. Everything was new. Commander Ji-ho led the team to a safe distance from the ship, and they set up their first camp. Large tents went up, and equipment was placed carefully on the ground. Other team members checked machines and tools. But Hei-Wan was already moving toward the forest, her scientific equipment hanging from her shoulders. "Where are you going?" Ji-ho called after her. "I want to study the plants first," Hei-Wan shouted back. "Just a short distance into the forest. I will stay within communication range." Ji-ho wanted to say no, but he understood the excitement of a scientist on a new world. He had been like that once, a long time ago. "Stay close," he said, "and check in every hour." Hei-Wan walked into the crystal forest, and it was like walking into a dream. The light here was different from the clearing. It was softer, more blue than gold. The trees were even more beautiful up close. She could see that they were not really crystal, but they had crystal-like structures growing on their bark. When she touched one gently, it was warm and smooth. She spent the first few hours collecting samples and taking notes. She recorded the sounds the forest made. They were soft, almost like music, humming and clicking sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She saw small creatures moving in the branches above her, but they were too quick to study. They seemed to be watching her as much as she was watching them. By the afternoon, Hei-Wan realized she had been working without rest for many hours. The planet's sun was lower in the sky now, and the shadows between the trees grew longer. She was tired in a way that made her bones feel heavy. The gravity on Vortalis 7 was lighter than Earth, but somehow it still pulled at her, making her movements slow. She decided to walk back to the camp, but as she turned to leave, she saw something that stopped her. There was a chair. It was made of stone, carved into the side of the cliff face. It was old, worn smooth by time and weather. The arms were shaped perfectly for someone to rest their hands there. Someone, or something, had made this a long time ago. Hei-Wan knew she should leave it alone, but the chair was so inviting. She was so tired. Just for a few minutes, she thought. Just to rest for a few minutes while she downloaded the data from her cameras. She sat down. The stone was warm and fit her body perfectly. She closed her eyes for just a moment, and the sound of the forest seemed to grow louder around her. The humming and clicking became like a lullaby. Her head fell back against the stone. She did not notice when her breathing became slow and even. She did not notice when her hands fell away from her equipment and rested in her lap. She did not notice the soft sounds coming from deeper in the forest, getting closer and closer. Commander Ji-ho waited at the camp and checked his watch. Hae-won had been in the forest for over 8 hours now. She had checked in 4 times, each time saying she was fine and would return soon. But soon had turned into hours, and now the sun was setting. The sky was turning from blue to deep purple. He was about to send a search team when her communicator buzzed. Ji-ho answered quickly, but what came through was strange. There was no voice, only the sound of wind and forest sounds, and underneath it all, something else. Soft sounds, like animals, like many animals moving together. "Hae-won," he said. "Hae-won, can you hear me?" There was no answer. In the forest, near the old stone chair, Hae-won slept the sleep of the truly exhausted. She did not hear the sounds. She did not see the shadows moving between the trees. She did not see the massive shapes coming closer, step by careful step. She did not see the intelligent eyes watching her from the darkness, studying this strange small creature that had come to their world. The first one to reach her was a young creature, tall and covered in thick brown fur. His name was Dae-sung, and he had been hunting when he heard the strange humming sounds of human equipment. Now, standing before the sleeping stranger, he tilted his large head to one side. He had never seen anything like her before. Behind Dae-sung, more shapes emerged from the forest. They were the Vorons, the intelligent creatures of Vortalis 7. They were massive beings, like bears but larger, with intelligent eyes and careful movements. They were not angry. They were not hunting. They were curious, and something else. Something in their nature recognized what lay before them. A vulnerable creature. A stranger far from home. Someone who needed help. Dae-sung took a careful step closer to the sleeping human, and as he did, the other Vorans gathered in a circle around the stone chair, watching and waiting to see what would happen next. The night was deep and dark on Vortalis 7. The twin moons had risen, casting strange double shadows across the forest floor. Hae-won remained asleep in the stone chair, her chest rising and falling with slow, peaceful breaths. She had no idea how much time had passed, or that she was no longer alone. Dae-sung stood very close to her now. His massive head was level with her sleeping face. He was trying to understand what she was. She was so small, so fragile. Her skin was covered with strange material, like the outer shells of the hard-shelled creatures that lived near the water caves. But underneath that material, he could see parts of her that were soft and delicate. Her face was uncovered. Her small hands were uncovered. Carefully, as if she might break like thin ice, Dae-sung reached out one large paw and touched her shoulder. His claws were long, but he kept them relaxed and gentle. The strange creature did not wake. She did not move. She only slept on, peaceful and unaware. The other Vorans watched this interaction with great interest. There were perhaps 15 of them gathered in a loose circle around the chair. Some were older, their fur streaked with gray. Others were younger, barely past their first growth year. All of them made soft sounds, low rumbling clicks that only other Vorans could hear and understand. They were talking to each other. Young Eun-ji, a small female cub with bright eyes, moved closer. She was braver than the others, or perhaps more curious. She made a questioning sound, looking up at Dae-sung. He responded with a longer rumble, as if explaining something important. What Dae-sung was trying to communicate was simple, but profound. This creature was not from their world. It was lost, or tired, or both. And more importantly, it was vulnerable. The Vorans had an old understanding, written into their nature over generations. When something vulnerable came near, it was the duty of the strong to protect it. This was not something they had learned. It was something they were. HFY's equipment made a soft beeping sound. She had programmed her computer to alert her every hour, but the sound did not wake her. She only shifted a little in the chair, and her hand fell down to her side. One of the cameras attached to her vest made a small clicking noise as it adjusted. The Vorans flinched at the sounds, but they did not leave. Instead, they seemed even more convinced that this creature needed their help. The strange sounds were signs of its distress. The small, fragile body, the way it was shivering slightly in the cool night air of the forest, even in its sleep. Dae-sung made a decision. He turned to the other Vorans and made a series of loud, rumbling sounds. Some of the younger Vorans, the cubs mostly, scattered into the forest. They seemed to know exactly where they were going and what they were going for. Yoonji remained near the sleeping human. She was the smallest of the group, and somehow she understood that her small size made this creature less afraid. She hummed a soft sound, almost musical, and then she did something remarkable. She placed one small paw on top of HFY's hand, very gently, as if to say that she was there, and she was watching, and nothing bad would happen. The first cub to return was dragging something large behind him. It was a blanket, made from woven plant fibers that grew on the warm side of the cliff face. The Vorans used these blankets during their sleeping seasons, when the world grew cold and they needed comfort. The blanket was thick and soft, colored in shades of green and gold. The cub placed it carefully over HFY's legs. The next cub to arrive brought another blanket, this one woven with threads of blue and silver. Then another cub came, and another, each one carrying a blanket or a large piece of soft material. They were bringing everything they had that was warm and comfortable. HFY stirred slightly as the weight of the blankets increased, but she did not wake. The sleep that held her was deep and complete. She was dreaming, perhaps, of her home on Earth, or of the wonders she had hoped to find on this new world. One by one, the Vorans brought their blankets. An old Voran, scarred from long life, dragged a beautifully woven blanket from deep in the forest. A mother Voran brought soft feathers, collected and bundled together. Younger cubs brought materials they did not fully understand themselves, only knowing that the small creature needed to be warm and protected. Soon, HFY was covered in a mountain of blankets and soft materials. Only her face remained uncovered, and her small hands which rested on top of the pile. The blankets came in many colors and textures. Some were smooth, some were rough. Some seemed to be made from materials the humans had no names for. But all of them had been given freely, with a purpose that went deeper than words could explain. Dae-sung walked around the pile of blankets, examining his work. The other Vorans did the same, checking and adjusting, making sure the human was completely covered, completely protected. It was like they were wrapping up something precious and fragile. Then, as the night deepened, the Vorans settled down around the chair. They did not sleep. They kept watch. Yoonji curled up near HFY's head, her small body close but not touching. Dae-sung positioned himself on one side, his large body a wall against any wind or cold. Other Vorans arranged themselves in a loose circle, their eyes open and alert. The humming sounds of the forest continued around them, but the Vorans ignored these sounds. They were focused on their new charge. They had seen her confusion when she first looked at her surroundings. They had sensed her exhaustion, her loneliness on this strange world so far from anything she knew. And so they did what their nature told them to do. They protected. They cared. They gave what they had to give, and they asked for nothing in return. The night passed slowly on Vortalis 7. The twin moons moved across the sky. Stars that had never seen Earth rotated in their distant patterns. And around a stone chair in a crystal forest, a group of alien creatures kept vigil over a sleeping human, wrapped in blankets given freely from creatures she had never met, speaking a language she could never hope to understand. But in that simple act of protection and care, something important was happening. Something that would change the course of history for two worlds that had only just discovered each other's existence. Something that would prove that intelligence, true intelligence, is not measured by words or weapons, but by the simple choice to help those in need. The sky began to change color as the night grew older. The darkness became less complete, and the stars began to fade. Soon, the first of Vortalis VII's two suns would rise over the horizon, bringing the day. But in the hours before dawn, the forest was at its quietest, and the Vorans remained perfectly still around the sleeping human. Daesung had not moved from his position all night. His massive body was a shield, and his intelligent eyes had not closed once. He watched Heywan's breathing, making sure it stayed steady and strong. The pile of blankets rose and fell with each breath she took. It was a peaceful sight, and somehow Daesung seemed satisfied by it. But as the night began to fade, something changed. More Vorans appeared. Moving quietly through the crystal forest, they were not hiding or hunting. They were walking with purpose, and each one carried something. An older female Voran, gray streaks through her brown fur, approached the circle. She was carrying something that looked like a large furry throw, beautifully made and obviously precious. She looked at Daesung, and he made a soft, rumbling sound. It seemed like permission. Carefully, the old female draped her blanket over the pile, adding it to the mountain of covers that already protected the sleeping human. More came. And more. What had started as the gift of young cubs had become something like a ceremony. Each Voran that arrived brought something warm and comfortable. Some brought blankets they had been keeping for themselves, saved for the cold seasons. Some brought materials they had collected over many years, things of beauty and softness. One young Voran, no more than a year old, appeared dragging something almost as big as himself. It was a blanket made from the feathers of the flying creatures that lived in the upper reaches of the forest. The blanket was light and white, and it seemed to glow in the moonlight. The little cub worked hard to place it on top of the growing pile, and when it was finally settled, he made a proud sound, a little chirp that made the other Vorans rustle and hum. Yunji had moved around to where she could see Haiwan's face. The human's expression was peaceful in her sleep. Her small mouth was slightly open, and her dark hair spread out on the stone of the chair. To the young Voran cub, this strange creature was becoming less alien with every passing hour. In Yunji's mind, this was simply someone who needed help, and she would give it. The pile of blankets grew taller. It grew wider. Soon, Haiwan was barely visible beneath them, just the gentle curve of her small body creating a shape under the mountain of colors and textures. Blankets in deep blues and greens, bright golds and silvers, soft purples and warm oranges, all piled together in a gorgeous display of generosity. A very old Voran, with a scar across his face and eyes that held the weight of many years, came to the edge of the circle. He made a sound that was different from all the others, lower and more serious. All the other Vorans paused and looked at him with respect. He was clearly someone important, perhaps even a leader or elder. The old Voran studied the pile of blankets and the sleeping human for a long time. He looked at Daesung, and something passed between them, an understanding without words. The elder Voran made another sound, this one almost like approval. Then he turned and slowly walked back into the forest. His leaving seemed to signal something. The flow of new arrivals slowed, then stopped. The mountain of blankets had grown so large that Haiwan disappeared completely beneath them. She was a shape under a rainbow of colors, a monument to the generosity of creatures she did not know. Now, as the first light of dawn began to touch the tips of the crystal trees, something remarkable happened. The blankets themselves seemed to come alive. They had been woven from materials that had natural properties, and as the early morning light touched them, they began to glow softly. The golds became brighter, the blues more vivid, the purples and greens shimmering like precious stones. It was beautiful. It was a display of care and comfort that transcended species and language. The Vorans gathered closer, and they made soft sounds, almost like singing. It was a low humming that seemed to come from deep within their chests. Yunji tilted her head back and added her small voice to the chorus. Even Day Sung, the strong young male who had first approached the stranger, closed his massive eyes and hummed. Inside the mountain of blankets, Haiwan continued to sleep, unaware of the miracle that had unfolded around her. She did not know that an entire population of alien creatures had given away their most precious possessions. She did not know that they had sung to her, protected her, cared for her through the long night. But on some level, deeper than conscious thought, perhaps her body felt it. Perhaps some part of her understood that she was safe here, held in the arms of the forest itself, through the care of these impossible, wonderful beings. The sun rose fully now. The first sun touched the crystal trees and made them blaze with light. The second sun followed, creating the strange double shadows that marked Vortalis 7 as different from all other worlds. And under the pile of blankets, in the heart of the crystal forest, a human woman slept on, her fate about to change forever. The Vorans remained around her, their vigil continuing. They did not move away or lose interest. They settled themselves more comfortably on the ground, but they stayed. Their eyes remained open and watchful. They had begun to protect this small creature, and they would continue to do so for as long as she needed them. What had started as a simple act of comfort had become something sacred to them, a new member of their gathering, a stranger who had become, through their own choice and nature, someone worth protecting, someone worth giving to, someone who belonged here now, in their forest, under their care, wrapped in the blankets that represented every generous heart in their community. Haiwan's eyes opened slowly, as if the light of the two suns was pulling her back into the world from very far away. For a moment, she did not understand where she was. She felt heavy, weighted down, unable to move. Her first thought was panic. Was she trapped? Was she hurt? She tried to sit up, and blankets tumbled around her. Colors fell like an avalanche. Gold and blue and green and silver, all the blankets she did not know existed came into her sudden awareness. She gasped, pushing at them, trying to understand what had happened. Then she saw the eyes. They were everywhere. Large, intelligent eyes watching her with curiosity and something else, something that might have been concern. Haiwan's training kicked in, pushing down the fear. She had been trained for encounters with unknown species. Stay calm. Do not make sudden movements. Assess the situation. What she saw was remarkable. She was surrounded by Vorans. Not one or two, but at least 30 of them, arranged in a loose circle around the stone chair. Some were massive, clearly adults. Some were smaller, which meant they were younger. All of them were watching her. The blankets were everywhere. Dozens of them, maybe more. They came in colors and textures she had never seen before. Some were clearly ancient, their weaving loose and faded. Others were bright and new, carefully made. They were piled so high that she had been completely buried beneath them. Haiwan looked down at her own body, covered in blankets. She looked at the Vorans. She looked back at the blankets. Understanding began to come to her. Slowly at first, then all at once like a flood. These creatures had done this. They had covered her with blankets. Not because they wanted to harm her, but because they wanted to protect her, to keep her warm, to care for her. Tears began to form in her eyes. She had been trained for many things. But she had not been trained for this kind of kindness from an alien species. "Thank you," she said softly. The words came out in her own language, English, a sound that had never been heard in these forests before. Her voice was small and shaking. The Vorans did not understand the words, but something in her tone seemed to matter. Daesung made a soft humming sound. Other Vorans echoed it. The sound was gentle, peaceful, almost like approval. Heywan carefully pushed more blankets away, creating space for herself to move. She was slow and careful, treating each blanket with respect. She could feel the different materials now. Some were woven plant fiber, strong and durable. Some seemed to be made of down feathers, incredibly soft. Some were made of materials she could not even identify. As she moved the blankets, she realized something else. These were not just random pieces of cloth. These were possessions. They were personal items. She could see signs of age and use on some of them. Some were decorated with careful patterns. These were valuable things to these creatures, and they had given all of them to her. Young Yunji moved closer, making a soft, questioning sound. The small Voran cub tilted her head, looking at Heywan's face. Heywan realized that the cub was concerned. The human's tears had worried the young creature. Without thinking too much about it, Heywan reached out and picked up one of the blankets, a soft purple one with beautiful patterns woven into it. She held it out to Unji. "For you," she said in English, knowing the words would not be understood, but hoping the gesture would say what words could not. Yunji made a surprised sound, a little chirp, but she did not take the blanket back toward herself. Instead, she looked at Daesung, as if asking permission. Daesung moved closer, his massive form somehow not threatening despite his size. He settled down beside the stone chair, and Heywan could see his eyes clearly now. They were intelligent, thoughtful, kind. She carefully placed the purple blanket over Yunji's small shoulders. The cub seemed delighted, making happy chirping sounds. Other young Vorans gathered closer, watching this interaction with great interest. Heywan's communicator made a sound. It was her first indication that time had actually passed. She checked it quickly. 7 hours. She had been asleep for 7 hours. Commander Jiho must be worried sick. She activated the communicator. "Jiho, can you hear me? I am okay. I am safe." Static answered her for a moment. Then Jiho's voice came through, tight with concern. "Heywan, where have you been? We have been trying to reach you. What happened? Are you in danger?" Heywan looked around at the Vorans, at the mountain of blankets, at young Yunji wearing the purple blanket like a gift. "No," she said into the communicator. "I am not in danger. I am safe. Safer than I have ever been." "What do you mean?" Jiho asked. "Where are you?" "I am at the stone chair, about 2 kilometers into the forest, near the cliff face." "But, Jiho, you need to listen to me carefully. I have made contact with the Vorans. They found me sleeping and they protected me. They gave me blankets. Dozens of blankets. They have been keeping watch over me all night." There was a long pause. Then Jiho said, "Heywan, are you sure? The initial report suggested the Vorans might be aggressive." "They are not aggressive," Heywan said, and her voice was certain. "They are kind. They are intelligent, and they are kind. They saw that I was vulnerable, and they helped me. They gave me everything they had that was warm and comfortable." Behind her, Daesung made a rumbling sound, and other Vorans echoed it. It was a low, peaceful sound, almost like they were confirming what she had said. "Heywan, I am sending a team to your location," Jiho said. "Do not move. We will be there in 30 minutes. "Wait," Heywan said quickly. "Be careful. These are intelligent creatures. We need to show them respect. Come peacefully. Come as friends, not as a military force. Promise me." Another pause. Then, "I promise, we will come as friends. Stay safe." Heywan closed the communicator and looked at the Vorans gathered around her. They could not understand her words, but they seemed to understand something of what had just happened. Dae-sung made another sound, this one questioning. Heywan wished so desperately that she could tell them everything, that she could explain that she was one of the first humans they would meet, that this moment would change everything for both their species, that their kindness to a stranger, their willingness to give and protect, would be remembered for generations to come. Instead, she reached out and placed her small hand gently on top of Dae-sung's massive paw. "Thank you," she said again, knowing he did not understand the words, but hoping he would understand the meaning. "Thank you for saving me, for protecting me, for showing me that kindness does not need a common language." And as the twin suns climbed higher in the sky of Vortalis 7, a human woman sat surrounded by alien creatures in a crystal forest, holding a moment of connection that would echo through history. A moment that said, louder than any words could say, that there are bonds between beings that go deeper than species, deeper than language, deeper than anything else in the universe. The bonds of care, of protection, of love. The human team arrived exactly 30 minutes later. Commander Ji-ho led them forward carefully, weapons held low and non-threatening. He had 15 people with him, all trained in first contact situations, but nothing had prepared them for what they saw. There was a mountain of blankets surrounding a stone chair, and around that mountain, perhaps 30 or more massive bear-like creatures stood peacefully. Heywan sat in the middle of them, wrapped in the blankets, with a small alien cub wearing a purple blanket draped over her shoulders like a gift. Ji-ho stopped his team. He raised his hand, signaling them to stay calm and stay back. Then he walked forward slowly, hands visible and open to show he was not armed. Dae-sung watched this new human approach. The massive Voran cub did not move to attack or defend. He simply observed, his intelligent eyes tracking every movement. "Heywan," Ji-ho said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Are you hurt?" "No," Heywan said. "I am fine. More than fine. Commander, these creatures are not dangerous. They are the opposite of dangerous. They are compassionate. They are intelligent. They are everything we hope to find in an alien species." Ji-ho looked at the mountain of blankets, at the gathered Vorans, at the small cub in the purple blanket. He was a military officer, trained to assess threats. But what he was seeing did not fit any threat profile. What he was seeing was kindness. "What happened?" he asked Heywan. "I fell asleep in this chair," Heywan explained. "I was exhausted, and the chair was comfortable, and I did not realize how long I had been in the forest. When night came, I was still sleeping, and these creatures found me. Instead of attacking or capturing me, they covered me with blankets to keep me warm. They stayed with me all night, watching over me. They protected me." Other members of the expedition began to lower their weapons fully. Some of them stared in wonder at what they were witnessing. "They gave up their own blankets?" Ji-ho asked, understanding the implication immediately. "Yes," Heywan said. "Every single one you see here came from the Vorans. Some of them look like they are very old, like the Vorans have been keeping them for many years. They brought everything they had that was warm and comfortable, and they gave it all to a stranger who was vulnerable." Ji-ho stepped even closer. He was now standing near Dae-sung. The massive Voran cub could have killed him easily, but instead, Dae-sung simply watched, curious about this new human. "Why did you not call for help?" Ji-ho asked. "Because I was not in danger," Heywan said simply. "I was in the safest place I have ever been, and I did not want to interrupt what was happening. What they were doing, it was important. It meant something. It still does." The old Voran, the one with the scar across his face, stepped forward. He looked at Ji-ho, then at Heywan. He made a deep, rumbling sound, and all the other Vorans seemed to listen with respect. When he finished, he turned and moved back into the forest. Other adult Vorans followed him, leaving the younger ones behind. "What was that?" Jiho asked. "I do not know," Haywan said. "But I think it was approval. I think their leader was telling us that we were welcome here." Over the next several hours, the situation became clearer. Haywan worked with her scientific equipment to begin recording Voran's sounds and behaviors. She showed them images and videos from Earth on her computer screen. The Vorans watched with intense curiosity. Dae Sung particularly seemed interested in the images of humans. He pointed at pictures of humans on Earth and then at Haywan, making questioning sounds. It was clear that he was trying to understand where she came from, why she was so different from the creatures of Vortalis 7. Yunji never left Haywan's side. The small cub seemed to have formed an immediate attachment to the human woman. She followed her everywhere, making soft sounds, occasionally reaching out to touch Haywan's hand or face. Commander Jiho called back to the main base camp. He requested that they halt all extraction procedures and prepare for extended first contact. He also requested cultural experts, linguists, and peace negotiators. This was not a threat situation. This was something else entirely. "This is first contact," Jiho said into his communicator. "And it is beautiful. We are not dealing with aggressive beings. We are dealing with creatures who understand compassion and generosity. This changes everything." As the day progressed, more Vorons came to see the humans. Young and old, they seemed interested, but not threatening. Children played near the human equipment, curious but careful. Mothers kept watch, but there was no hostility in their watching. By evening, it was clear that an understanding was forming, not through words, but through action and observation. The Vorans learned that these humans were peaceful. The humans learned that the Vorans were intelligent, kind, and more advanced in their understanding of compassion than perhaps even humans were. Jiho made a decision that would echo through history. He called all his team members together and stood them in a line before the Vorans. Then he bowed, a deep, respectful bow. Haywan understood immediately what he was doing. She stood and bowed as well. One by one, each member of the human expedition bowed to the Vorans, showing respect and gratitude for the kindness shown to Haywan. The Vorans made a sound, a collective hum that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath their feet. It was a sound of acceptance, of connection, of the beginning of something new. That night, the humans and Vorans sat together in the crystal forest. They could not speak the same language, but they communicated in other ways. Gestures, drawings made in the soft earth, music, because when one of the Vorans hummed a melody, Haywan found herself humming along. And then one of the human team members pulled out a small instrument and played a harmony. It was simple, it was basic, but it was real. Two species meeting for the first time, creating something together that transcended the barriers between them. And through it all, Yunji stayed close to Haywan, and Dae Sung sat nearby, watching over them both. Because in that moment, something profound had happened. Two worlds had touched, and they had done so not with weapons or fear, but with kindness and understanding. The Vorans had covered a sleeping stranger with blankets, and in doing so they had changed the course of history for both their kind and humanity. They had shown that intelligence is not measured by technology or power, but by the ability to see suffering and respond with compassion. To see vulnerability and respond with protection, to see a stranger and respond with love,